Phil Vischer. Welcome back to the show. I am here with Sky Jatani.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, wearing an Okoboji track jacket.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
This was my sweatshirt.
I was there when you bought it. Not with you in the store, but at Okoboji with you when you showed up with it. Because why did you have to buy it? Because it was going to rain, or
it was cold.
Chilly? It was chillier than you thought it was going to be.
It was August. I didn't come
August
prepared
in
with
Iowa. Yeah.
But now it's getting chilly here, so I can wear it again.
You know, in the Midwest, our weather is variable.
Everyone says that about everywhere.
Oh no, it is not. Everywhere is not.
Well, pretty much anywhere north of the Tropic of Cancer or Capricorn or whatever tropic that is.
All right. Aruba, not very variable. And Christian Taylor.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Christian. How are you?
Good. How are
I
you?
haven't seen you in a couple of weeks.
I know. I've missed you guys.
You're good?
I'm good.
Everything's great?
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. And I'm going to sing the theme song, and then we'll introduce our guest for the week. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Oh, we'll talk to Sky.
Hi, Phil.
Wow, you're jumpy. And Christian, too.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Christian. And we've got a guest right here for you. I'll tell you who it is in just a second. Hey, it's a podcast, still in here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. So we've been traveling.
We have been.
We've been traveling. Sky and I were at the same conference, but not on the same day.
No, we didn't travel together.
No, we did not travel together.
But we did have an interesting dinner together.
We had a...
That's not something you can talk about?
We were at the 5-2 conference. The 5-2 as opposed to Fifth Third Bank, which is similar.
Yeah.
What does the 5-2 conference stand for?
Loaves and fishes.
5 loaves, 2 fish.
It's about entrepreneurial ministry, kind of.
Something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of Lutherans.
A lot of Lutherans.
Yeah.
It's Lutheran heavy.
Whole lot of Lutherans.
Like
They
Germany.
work harder than the rest of
It
us?
was Lutheran heavy.
I think it has origins
that.
in the Lutheran
Yeah,
community.
it had
so
origins
drew a
in
lot of,
I don't know what. And we both spoke there, but on different days. And we went out to dinner with 10 pastors to, it was in Austin, Texas, which is kind of a groovy little place.
I love that place.
It's not that little, but it's groovy. And so they took us out, all the speakers that could come, went out to a hip kind of Austin.
You remember what it was called?
Odd Duck.
That's right.
We went to Odd Duck. Was it the Odd Duck Grill or the Odd Duck Cafe?
I don't know.
Just
It
Odd
was like a
Duck?
farm-to-table kind of.
Yeah.
But very
small plate.
very shishi.
It was shishi and small platey.
Yeah.
Were you hungry when you left?
No, because there were so many. Because we didn't know, there were 10 of us, and we were all not from there. And so we're staring at the menu going, what? And so the waiter just said, well, here's one way we could do it. We'll just bring you 3 of everything.
And everyone just shared.
Yeah, and so they brought us 3 of everything, but only one thing at a time.
Right.
And some of the things were quite tiny.
Oh.
So it's like, here's 15 minutes, and you get 2 bites of this, and then 15 minutes later you'll get 2 bites of
It's like
that.
appetizers all through the night.
Yeah, it was sort of like teasing. Like,
Yeah.
It was very.
it was good.
It was good.
Everything was
You didn't know
good.
quite what you were eating usually because it was so elaborately presented. Coiffed. That's a good way to put it.
Thank you.
I know that there were duck eggs.
Yeah,
and
there was a duck egg.
And there was a
once,
fish head.
And there was the deep fried redfish heads, which are huge.
It was a huge.
like a fish
Wait,
head.
wait, stop.
Yeah.
A deep fried red fish head
Head. It
Just
was
the
like the
head.
size.
Just the head.
It was
yeah.
like the size of a softball.
that you would eat.
Yeah.
Well, everyone would just dig at it.
Yeah, you dug
Why
at it.
the heck would you
I don't know,
eat a
because I
fish
think
head?
we didn't pay enough to get the body. I think the VIPs got the bodies.
That sounds like the most disgusting
I
thing.
have to admit, I didn't eat that
And
one.
pastors from out of town got the head. There was a little meat on it, but it was hard to tell because it was deep fried. So there was breading.
That is so disgusting.
There was breading and a little meat and then a head. And so it was dangerous.
Ugh.
It was, but it was good. But we were there almost 3 hours.
It was a long meal.
Is this
more
an
than 2.5
expensive
hours.
restaurant?
It wasn't cheap.
No,
I didn't have to pay for
Yeah,
it.
we didn't.
We built.
No, I just wondered on the scale of like pricey to, fast food.
Well, none of the prices were very much.
Oh, 'cause each thing was really small.
It was like,
Right.
there's only $12 for that dish, but that dish is the size of your palm. So it was hard to tell. I think the bill was pretty large.
Hefty.
Yeah.
Sure.
The
At
fritters
the
were
end.
very good.
And then I
Corn
went from
fritters?
there. This was
know what they were.
I went from there to Houston, through Houston to Wichita, And then from Wichita, drove in a rental car an hour and a half to Sterling, Kansas, which is about the size of one of the small plates from Odd Duck. And Sterling College is there, which is a old Presbyterian college, has been there for 100 and some years. And I spoke at a special lecture, the Freeman Lecture Series. Mr. and Mr. Freeman, Mr. and Mrs. Freeman were there, who are lovely people.
And what did you speak about?
I told them my story.
Oh, okay.
That's what I do when I go someplace for the first time.
Okay, for the very first time you start with your story, and then when you go back,
then I come back, and then I have to think of something else to say.
Well, I think you have now at least 2 speeches that I know of.
Yeah, I've definitely 2, and maybe more than that. Probably more.
I'm doing something different. With some of my talks.
What?
I decided to do this in light of the 5-2 conference. I'm taking some of my talks.
Spanish?
No, I'm putting them into monographs so people can download them, like from my website, like a
What's a
PDF,
monograph?
like a paper, a PDF.
Why do we call it a monograph?
A monograph is an article on a single topic of.
Isn't a polygraph a lie detector?
But that's not what I said.
So if you have more than one monograph, you're now lying about something?
Polygraph means more than one word, like you're double speaking.
Oh, okay.
Get it?
Yeah,
It's
that's lying.
Yeah.
Oh, so monograph is
one
how
word.
you measure one word.
On a graph. Right. Anyway, if you guys want, some of my, they're going to be up in a day or 2, but some of these are going to be available for download on my website.
If you do that, then people will read it and then say, "Oh, good, now we don't need to pay him to come speak." And
Well,
you're
they're
gonna
going to be
money.
like $2 on my website.
Oh, you're selling them.
Yeah.
Oh.
Unless you
Our
actually
guest
go to the
needs
conference,
to start doing that,
and then you can get it for free.
Because he's underemployed.
And I'm not
Why don't
doing
we
this for
introduce
all
our guest?
Yeah.
Our guest has joined Donald Trump's ranks of the underemployed.
Or is he one of those
Yes.
millennials in the basement of his parents' house, because he is
He
in
is
the basement.
the basement of somebody's house, yeah. Our guest, once again, for the second time returning, is Dr. Mr. Reverend Preston Sprinkle. Are you ordained?
I am ordained, yeah.
What denomination? Any denomination? Non-denomination?
I think it's just it's like some mail order ordination to get free
like
housing allowance.
University of Phoenix kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it took me about 10 minutes to get ordained. So
That's fantastic. Say more that gives us confidence in the modern church. Okay. Preston Sprinkle was on a few weeks ago. He's in Boise, Idaho, correct? He's
correct.
Yes, he's in his safe room because of that movie where they say murder is legal for the next 24 hours, The Purge. Did you see The Purge?
I've never watched it because
there's 3 of them now, 3 purges. Once a year. In the future, this is how we will control violence. Once a year, everything is legal. Anyone can do anything to anyone, but only for 24 hours.
It sounds like the west side of Chicago.
Oh.
No, because that continues every day.
Well, yeah.
That was
Every
kind of a
24 hours.
downer. You made it a sad thing.
It is a sad thing. We should look at our country and do something about it. Or go into a safe room like Preston.
Yeah, go into a
I
safe
wish
room.
you would run for president.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
No, you would be such a great leader.
Craziest thing. Okay,
Sky for president.
Preston's here because we had him on before, and we didn't have much time to talk about it, but we mentioned he had a new book coming out called Go, and which is not about prostate issues or any other late-night elderly men running to the bathroom
Constipation.
Returning discipleship to the front lines of faith. I'm holding up a copy of it for those of you that watch on YouTube. For the rest of you, it's got a gold Go and a line with a lot of birds.
Yeah, it looks like a scene from The Birds.
Oh, but one bird is flying away. I get it.
I thought it's because the birds were pooping on people.
No, that's not it at all.
Preston, that title sounds...
the one bird flying away is going to attack the phone booth, I think.
Oh, that's exciting.
Hey, that title sounds more like a book on mission, and yet the subtitle says it's about discipleship.
Yeah, what's that all about?
Ah, good catch. Well, I didn't actually... the title was suggested by my editor at NavPress. He said, "Hey, we're thinking about naming it Go," and I said, "All right, cool, go for it."
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm not good at titling. I usually think of a good title like a year after my books come out, and then I'm like, you know what? I should have renamed that. So.
Well, we'll have you on in a year, and you can tell us what it should have been called. I had one story that I just wanted to throw out that I thought was kind of interesting that has nothing to do with Preston. Archaeologists just found one of King Hezekiah's toilets, and it may prove the Bible.
Oh, wow. That's a headline.
Did you hear about this?
No, I didn't.
This is very exciting.
I didn't hear about it
I'm
either.
really curious what your news feed is and how you find this stuff.
Archaeologists in Israel were recently digging at the site of the ancient city of Tel Lashish, located in the kingdom of Judah. There they uncovered what is believed to be a 2,700-year-old toilet, like one actually described in the Bible. The toilet, I'm not done, there's more, hang on. The toilet was found in a room of a multi-chamber gate that may have once been a shrine. Nearby were small altars of cult figures which appeared to have been intentionally damaged. Their, quote, horned corners had been smashed, unquote. According to the Times of Israel, it looks like ancient Israelite rulers installed a toilet in the altar room as a way of desecrating idols to false gods.
Or defecating idols. to
Exactly.
false-
They put a toilet in a pagan altar room so they could poop on their gods. Isn't that fantastic?
That reminds me of I went shortly after 9/11. I went into a urinal or
Yeah.
a bathroom at a.
You didn't actually climb into
No,
a urinal.
I went
did
to
you?
a urinal in a bathroom at a Crate and Barrel, not a Crate and Barrel, at a Cracker Barrel.
Wow, that's a
Yeah,
difference.
at a Cracker Barrel somewhere on the expressway when I was
I
traveling.
meant meet me at Crate and Barrel.
and the the little urinal cake
yeah.
that they have. Yeah, you have boys. You know.
I do. In
Yeah.
fact, one boy
Yeah.
told me that one of my perfumes smelled like a urinal.
urinal
Oh, that's
I
terrible.
could never wear it again.
Anyway,
Oh,
this
the urinal
this
cake.
one was embossed with the face of Osama bin Laden
In Cracker Barrel.
at Cracker Barrel.
That's hilarious.
Was that like years ago when
this
that
is-
was a thing?
This was years ago.
So go back
Yeah.
and tell me what's embossed on the Cracker Barrel urinal cakes this year.
Oh, I know what it
I'm
is.
worried about that. As it
At least
turns
I know
out,
what I would put on it.
this exact scenario is mentioned in the Old Testament. 2 Kings 10:27 says the Israelite forces had previously, quote, demolished the sacred stone of Baal, torn down the temple of Baal, and people have used it for a latrine to this day.
Interesting.
2 Kings 18:4 describes how Hezekiah later destroyed idols and altars to other gods. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. The researchers believe this toilet was installed as part of Hezekiah's reforms against cult worship.
That's cool.
Is that nuts or what?
That's kind of nuts.
Preston, what do you make of that? Pretty exciting, huh?
That's super exciting. Ancient toilets. Heck yeah, man. That's my next book, actually.
Ancient toilets.
Is it called Go?
It's called. They're ancient toilets, so it's called Went. Because we're looking forward. Okay, so I like to bring stories that are, that hey, there's something that kind of supports what the Bible actually says in some way, shape, or form,
Okay.
and it involves toilets. So you really can't beat that.
This was a win for you on
Yeah.
multiple fronts, huh?
It's the historicity of the Bible and bathroom humor in one story.
And our guest is named Preston Sprinkle.
oh, this is fantastic.
Sorry, Preston.
You know what? It just goes to show you that boys are all about bathroom humor.
Still want me to be president?
Oh, stop it. Is there ever bathroom humor in TV shows that are written by women? Because there's a heck of a lot of bathroom humor in
I will
TV
just
shows
say
written
I
by
don't
men.
find it funny. So if I was up to writing them, I
Okay.
probably wouldn't put any in.
But enough about bathrooms. Let's talk about Preston. You have a podcast called Theology in the Raw,
Yeah, that's correct.
right? Which you record in the buff, correct?
It's yeah, right. It's actually a radio show here in Boise, and then they turn it into a podcast after I
Oh, okay.
air the radio.
But
show.
it's only 15 minutes long, right?
And that's because the radio shows from 2:15 to 2:30 every weekday in Boise. So it's got to be. I've got a real hard cutoff. So.
Is that all they trust you for?
Exactly? Yeah. That's my leash.
Okay. And recently you had your brother-in-law
Yeah.
go on. You were out of town, and so he took over the radio show with your knowledge.
So he's an Old Testament scholar. He actually teaches in Israel, so he
Yeah.
probably knows all about this finding.
That's cool.
And he's also big into politics, so he loves to merge Christianity and politics. And he said, "Hey, while you're gone, I'm thinking about doing a thing where I'm going to present a Christian case for each of the three candidates, including Gary Johnson, and just let people kind of think through that." And I said, "Hey, go for it. You're gonna make a lot of people mad, but
Yeah,
I'll forward the emails to you.
Did you ever at some point think what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, right. You know what's funny is I got an email from a person who said, I will never, ever, ever listen to your show again because you allowed this guy make a case for Trump. The very same day, I got an email from a lady that was very, very angry that I would ever allow a person to make a case for Hillary. So, and I wanted to kind of forward these emails to each other and just let them, hammer it out. It was amazing. I got, ferocious critiques from people for all very different reasons, all claiming to be Christian, which is just kind of the sign.
Was anybody upset that you gave a case for Gary Johnson?
I didn't hear much about him. No, nobody really, I don't think anybody cared about that.
Did people seem to think there was a clear winner in your following, or no?
Did you do an online poll?
Yeah. Did you do an unscientific online poll?
I don't know. I think a lot of people were very shocked at how I think his case for Hillary, and he is not a Hillary fan at all. He may even be voting for Trump. I don't know, but his Christian case for Hillary was pretty provocative, and a lot of people were kind of shocked by that. So, yeah.
Okay. Well,
did you listen to them?
I listened to the Trump one, and I got kind of agitated.
I listened to the Hillary one.
You listened to the Hillary one?
Did.
Did you get agitated?
No.
Okay.
Well, so since you
Did
both
you listen
listened
to Gary Johnson?
I didn't even know this was happening. But since you've listened to the Hillary one, would you please summarize that, and would you summarize the Trump one?
No, that's not what this
I'm
episode
curious,
is.
Sky. What did you think, Sky, about the Hillary one? Because I was really intrigued by that one.
It wasn't really new information for me.
Okay.
So I wasn't shocked by it. I can understand why some people who have never heard those things would have been shocked by it. It really, what it comes down to, it's not really a case for or against Hillary. It's a principled stand against abortion or a pragmatic stand against abortion. Do you try to outright outlaw abortion, or do you pursue policies that will reduce the number of abortions? And that's a complicated discussion that Christians should have, but it's not one that we often do have.
Okay, good. So if you want to check that out, go to Theology in the Raw. You have to listen in the buff also. That's one of Preston's rules, but preferably in the privacy of your own home. And you can listen to the 3 arguments for Trump, Clinton, and Johnson. I don't even know what he looks like.
Blondish hair.
He's had a couple of huge gaffes.
Yeah,
lately.
is he the one that doesn't know what Aleppo is, or
any leaders?
Any foreign leaders?
Right.
Well, that's Christian. He's so focused on Christ and the church that he doesn't even see anything else. Is that that's not Christian.
No.
He's a governor
Of New Mexico, former governor.
He's a former governor of New Mexico. I don't think he has much of a chance.
No, but now the argument is people who don't like Trump or Clinton who might vote for him as a protest candidate. Is that a good thing to do?
Is
a
that
bad
a
thing to
sin?
do?
I think it's a sin.
It's a sin to vote for a third party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Preston has a new book. It's called Go, Returning Discipleship to the Front Lines of Faith. And this was based on, as we mentioned last time, if you listened to the last time Preston was on, some research done by Barna, our friend David Kinnaman, about, do you think it really showed, is it people's impressions of how well we're doing discipleship, or is it really how well we're doing discipleship or not?
It's both. I mean, they measured it from all different angles, from like the leader's perspective to people's perspective to, all across the board. They try to hit it from different angles. So I feel like it's, statistics are tough to measure, right? How is it really identifying the cause and the situation? I feel like the study was very thorough, and I feel like the cumulative weight of the study is pretty accurate. And it basically concluded that whatever we're doing in church, we're not doing a very good job producing disciples and make disciples, which is kind of what the church should be doing fundamentally.
Right. Okay. So let's dive into this deeper than we did last time. What are your key points in the book for what we're doing wrong? If you can summarize, just those 4 or 5 key points.
Oh man, I think. Do
you remember the book?
Yeah. My book is it's a personal interaction with the study. It's not just me interpreting the data. It's me looking at the data, evaluating it, kind of mulling over it, and then writing a book in response to it. So, I mean, fundamentally, I think that rather than looking at what it means to follow Jesus as a first century prophet, king, son of God, and then trying to translate that into the 21st century, I think we begin with 21st century Christianity, which is very westernized, very consumer driven, very professional. And then we go back and try to take a few verses here and there and tack it onto that way of doing church. And I think we have it fundamentally backwards. And I think that's a big problem. It's clear that that discipleship can't happen in isolation, for instance. I mean, it's a communal thing. And yet it seems that the way we do church and go about trying to do discipleship is very individualistic. And I think our church culture kind of plays into that.
Okay. What do you hope could change as a result of the book? You know, I mean, in a nutshell, how do we try to do discipleship now, or do we even try? And what would you like to see as a result of the book?
Well, I think doing discipleship and how we quote unquote do church are they're two very overlapping questions. And I think that, so I mean, I think we do need to lay on the table how we do church as a 21st century American kind of evangelical context. And I think we do a lot of things in church. We spend our money on things. We do church a certain way that is largely out of just, this is the way we've always done it, not because it's the most effective thing. I mean, for instance, most millennials, for instance, the people that are largely fleeing the church, they're not really into monological sermons anymore. Like, it's not really working. And yet we just keep preaching week after week sermons that are largely the same. They're more and more, I would say, routine driven. And not that there's good things that come about it, but I mean, if all you do is focus hard on, pulling off really good church services every Sunday, week after week, like, that's not going to sustain discipleship. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people may be attending really good church services, but they're not in connection with other believers. And that's not going to produce sustainable discipleship.
Right.
It'll produce kind of blip of spiritual highs throughout your month and year. But again, statistically, it's just not working.
Right.
So I think we need to lay back on the operating table, why do we do church the way we do? Why do we spend money on this? Why do we do this type of thing? Why are pastors involved in this and this and that? We need to lay all that on the table and ask, what can we do to better produce disciples?
Which is a kind of frightening thing to consider when, having been on a church staff, if you look at a church's budget or where its resources are allocated, not just money, but time, energy, space, probably in most churches, 80% or more is just on Sunday morning. So it becomes a self-perpetuating system where you need people coming in on Sunday morning to participate in that service, to give money, to then pay for all the resources that go into Sunday morning, and it goes around and around and around. And
here's a quote from Preston Sprinkle's book. Sunday morning services have become a resource hog and a spectator sport.
There you go.
Yeah. Sky, what you said, Sky, is that's a constant thread throughout the entire book. That we put so much focus on this Sunday morning event, which again, in and of itself, is not intrinsically bad, but we've made it so complex, so incredibly expensive that's where let's just take your 80. Let's be modest. Let's do 60%. Well, if 60% of time, money, energy, resources, personnel is going into the hour and a half on Sunday, it's, according to the Barna study, which I think is fairly accurate, that is not producing disciples. So we need to kind of question whether that's where all our energy should be going in.
But then you're asking church leaders to essentially change a wheel while the car is going 50 miles an hour, because they rely on that system to support themselves and all the other ministries of the church. So to just hit the brakes and say, we need to stop and retool this whole thing, very few folks are going to have the stomach for that.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. I think what churches can do is, first of all, be willing to and eager to kind of launch out new church plants. I mean, that alone should be something that's in the DNA of a church, reproducing and not just trying to build, the size of one church. But I think churches should get, rather than feel threatened by questioning the way we've always done it, they should be launching out church plants that say, hey, let's explore maybe a better, more simpler way of doing church, and commission people to go do that. And I do know churches that are doing that. They know they can't just overnight turn the ship around, but they can begin to invest in the next 5, 10, 20 years of ministry by launching out people to go explore new ways of doing it. And again, I come back to the question. You look at the Acts 2:42 church. People are gathering together for fellowship, for prayer, for the apostles' teaching, and there's one other thing. What's the fourth one?
Bake sales.
What's that?
Bake sales.
Baptisms.
Yeah.
So I mean, how much does it cost to gather together as believers to break bread, drink wine, fellowship, pray, learn the apostles' teaching? According to our current model, it's incredibly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't just do that. Like you need, a lot of church planter friends says, well, we need $250,000 to begin a church plant. So I'm spending 2 years raising money, $250,000 so that we can kind of get services going. And I'm like, man, is that how much it costs to break bread, drink wine, and fellowship?
It's good wine.
Really.
If it's really good wine,
Really
maybe, and
good
I'm all
wine.
for that.
Yeah. What you're describing, it sounds like you could do that in a pub.
Well, then you'd be bread and beer, but yeah.
Well, whatever. So you are planting a church. Is this still true?
No, it's not actually.
Is there anything in this book that's still accurate?
Page 35 is still, I still hold to it.
Okay.
It's funny. So I wrote that chapter you're referring to while my wife, my family, and I were exploring a church plant. And 6 months down the road, because we had so many other things going on, we didn't say the end of it. We just said, let's put this on hold until we kind of figure the rest of life out. So I think it's not a no. It's just we had to put a.
Okay. And you're no longer running a small Bible college.
No longer running a Bible college. I'm currently in my basement, unemployed. So yeah,
Is your name still Preston Sprinkle?
I'm going in right now to get that changed to Sky something. Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about what the church plant was going to be, because you were following a model that's happening around the Bay Area that Francis Chan had inspired. Tell us more about that.
So Francis's model is one that really intrigues me. I don't think it's the only model. I don't think there is any one model that everybody should follow. But he basically said, can we strip down the way we do church to the bare bones? And so he's planted a network of now 8 churches in San Francisco that all are raising up leaders, making disciples. They're sharing the gospel. They're growing incredibly deep in their faith. The community is so incredibly rich. There's teaching, there's prayer, there's community, there's all the ingredients of what makes a healthy church, and they're doing it for the last 5 years for no money. Not a single person's paid. There's no expenses. There's nothing goes into the church machine. All the tithe money goes into furthering the mission, helping the poor, sending out missionaries to unreached people groups. And the gospel is going forth in crazy ways at cost. And so, and some people say, well, that's Francis Chan. He can pull anything off. But when I went and visited, he's off in the corner just sitting there listening. He's not leading the thing. He's raised up other leaders that are taking it. So, I don't think it's the only way, but I think he has shown that we can do really effective ministry and discipleship and have vibrant worship and have engaging discipleship and teaching and have people grow in their faith. And we don't need to do that with all the bells and whistles that we've added onto this thing. So, it's intriguing. Again, it's not the only way, but I think it is a way that's been proven.
Yeah, and are they meeting in houses?
Yeah, they're meeting in house. I think 3 of the 4 gatherings are all in individual houses, and then once a month they come together at a park or something and just have a big, kind of a traditional worship service. But again, there's no money that goes into that. They just kind of get together.
Right, and pastors aren't paid. Everybody's volunteering.
No. And that's his thing. He says from the very beginning they establish a DNA that if you're going to be part of this community, you're all in. So like it's not going to just fall on the shoulders of the, few paid people and the 20% that volunteer.
Right.
It's everything in. And I said, well, what do you do with the high maintenance people, the people that just kind of come and sit? He goes like, well, they don't last long, because there is an expectation that if you're part of this community, you're using your gifts, you're pouring in,
Right.
you're doing something.
Right.
So it doesn't all fall on one person.
It seems like, because I'm reading some of that stuff in your book and thinking that's fantastic. If everyone actually implemented that, how much smaller would the church be in America? Do you lose 70% of professing Christians? Do you lose? And is that okay? Is that a good thing? Are we holding on too many loosely attached, more consumeristic people by spending all this money on, programs and coffee shops and valet parking and cup holders? I was at a mega church with cup holders. Actually, thought it was
that's where you're going to put your
fantastic.
communion cup.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was way too big for.
Oh, they're a big cup holder.
Yeah, it was a movie size cup holders, which was good because I had a Diet Dr. Pepper. If people actually did what you're asking them to do, what would it do to the church in America?
I think the numbers of professing believers or church-going people would definitely go down. I just wonder if the health of the church would be stronger, though. And I really do wonder. I'm not saying that, tongue in cheek. Like, my assumption is, I think you would have a smaller number of church-going people. I think it would probably be healthier. I think the relationships would probably be deeper, more challenging, more authentic. That's my assumption. But again, I guess, we wouldn't really know until we went that route. But
Yeah. What have you seen, like when you visited Francis Chan's little thing going on in San Francisco? What did you see that was different in terms of the people engaged?
Super authentic. I mean, you felt like you were at a family reunion. It was very diverse ethnically, socioeconomically. I mean, but that's probably because of San Francisco. So you have
Right.
techie people coming in, and you also had more inner city people and ex-cons and all that. But yeah, definitely you walk into the gathering and everybody's hugging each other. Everybody's talking. The people are hanging out for a few hours afterwards because they truly feel like, man, we are family. We know each other face to face. We're engaging each other's lives. We're holding each other accountable. So
Yeah.
it was, I mean, again, I don't want to overly glorify it. I'm sure it's got its problems, and there's other, relational problems that happen when you're in close relationship with people, but it was pretty sweet. I mean, I remember experiencing that, saying, man, I feel like people are longing for this. When I talk to people are longing for authentic, deep, honest relationships. And
Right.
I would say 70-80% of the people I talk to aren't getting that at church. And if that's not happening, then something fundamentally is wrong. If people aren't experiencing deep, authentic relationships with other believers, then I don't care how great the sermon is, the worship, whatever, that's a major, major problem. Discipleship can't happen without that.
Preston, isn't what you're describing where the whole small group movement really came from? There were these larger churches where they were attracting thousands of people, but they realized they had a huge back door because if people weren't connecting relationally, they tended not to stick around. Yeah. And so they created small groups where people could connect in homes and hopefully grow, and discipleship would happen there. So are people just figuring out that we actually just don't need all the other accoutrements and the big institution that we're funding? We really only need the small group to grow?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've had people say, when I describe kind of what I feel like church should be, they're like, oh, well, that's what we do in small groups. And if that's happening in small groups, then that's fantastic. And I don't have any real pushback to that. I still think that for most churches I talk to, small groups are still a distant secondary to the main gathering in terms of resources, energy, time. I mean, if all you did is go to a small group and never went to the Sunday gathering, people would say, how come you don't go to church? They wouldn't describe you as deeply involved in the church community. So I still wonder if this is what I do like about Chan's model is, the small group is the main gathering, and yet they still do gather at a large corporate gathering once a month, but that's not the main thing. That is kind of a special celebration that they do, but it's not the heartbeat of what it means to be involved in that church. So yeah, again, I mean, small groups can be. I've been to small groups that are still pretty lame. You know, I mean, just because
Yeah.
you're in a small group
We
doesn't
can,
guarantee.
we humans can put on lameness at any scale.
That's true.
You know, small, tiny concerts are not always good.
Yeah.
And huge concerts are not always terrible.
Sometimes what you're describing, Preston, is labeled the organic church movement. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term.
No, tell us about it.
We did some research and articles on this at Leadership Journal years ago.
Is it grass-fed and preservative-free?
Well, there's this romanticism about it. Well, it's organic. It's
Yeah.
authentic. It's real. And we had a couple pastors who were a part of this write in and go, "Hey, wait a minute." And one of them actually said, "You know what else is organic? Poop." and the point being, we tend to glorify these more exotic forms of church because they're foreign to us and they're different, and they take away all the baggage that we think we have in our institutional churches. And they go, well, yeah, but people are people, and it's messy, and there's a downside to not having structure,
You know, when
as well as an upside.
When you work out, they say, if you're working out with weights, they say switch up the kind of exercises you're doing. You know, so like if you do this with dumbbells all the time, try to do it on a machine every now and then, you know, and then go back to dumbbells, because your muscles get used to something and it becomes less effective. I'm wondering if the same is true for church, that just completely switching up, you know, go visit, you know, go to a Catholic church for a month, go to an inner city church for a month. Just the fact that you're experiencing God in a completely different tradition may refresh, you know, kind of knock away the cobwebs of routine. If it's not the format even as much as just becoming rote and routine.
I think that's
What do
a
you think
good
about
thing.
that? That's my new book right there.
That's a great idea. Also, reading broadly in traditions that are not your own and having your thinking about various ideas challenged.
I do think we need to be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Baby
you know?
Jesus?
Yeah, we don't want to throw him out either. Just because I think there is something incredibly valuable about, you know, traditional worship. The question is, how can we do that without it becoming the thing or the focus
Which is a good point. You know, 50 to 60 billion dollars is given to churches every year, and 18% of it goes to cover the cost of the buildings.
Just the building,
Yeah,
Right.
so
not
almost-
staffing and everything else.
No, almost $1 out of every 5 that we give is just for the darn building.
right.
But you gotta get, unless I mean, in the first century, if I'm correct, there were some wealthy Christians, and they would tend to gather in their homes because they had homes. Number one, because they would have been a little bigger. If you go to that model, do you need to have a really rich Christian in every little group so that you can use their house, or do you go to the
But you know what, you guys,
Park.
what just dawned on me too is the question I was going to ask you is, could you tell me at what point in time it morphed from, you know, the church in Acts where everyone was meeting in homes to there being a church? But then I realized, well, even at the same time, there was the temple, and you know, God did give the Israelites these instructions for this elaborate temple,
Right.
so there is precedence for that.
But here's the problem, and Preston, jump in at any moment. I think what we've conflated, and I've talked about this in some
Did
books.
you say President Trump in at any
I said
moment?
Preston, jump in, not President Trump in.
Bite your tongue.
We have conflated an Old Testament form of spirituality and a New Testament form. In the Old Testament, you're right. God created a tabernacle and a temple where his presence would dwell, and the people would go to offer sacrifices, and that's where they would encounter him. And Paul especially speaks, although other New Testament writers do as well, about the new covenant in Christ. We don't go to a temple. The Holy Spirit dwells within us. And it's not an external encounter with God like Moses had on the mountain. He talks about this in 2 Corinthians 3. It's the internal dwelling of God through the presence of the Spirit. And it's a glory that doesn't fade. And yet most of the way we tend to do religion, including in evangelicalism, is we want to build another temple and make the glory of God an external thing that is put on by priests, and we are going to gather there and pay them money to help us encounter God. And we deny, effectively, the reality of the new covenant, that you can actually encounter the fullness of God in communion through the presence of his Holy Spirit. And that's what bothers me about a lot of the way we do church, is it's a way of implicitly denying the reality of the new covenant and trying to go back to old covenant forms of community and
Great
worship.
answer to my question.
There you go.
Thank you. For
And I
that.
just realized that fish head on your wall is about the same size as the one we ate at the
It
restaurant.
is the red fish.
Disgusting.
I don't,
well,
no one can see that.
Can you answer the other question I had, which when did it morph from these house groups to like this?
It was a Tuesday.
What century?
Tuesday afternoon.
And why? Why did it change?
It was probably the legalization of Christianity under Constantine, when it went from being an illegal cult to becoming the established religion of the Roman Empire. And then all the cultic practices of pagan Rome, the temples and all of that,
The worship bands.
became converted into Christian worship. And suddenly it became the state-established religion.
And it was
everything.
Constantine's mother who built churches all over the place. Many of the first, good-sized churches.
Yeah, what was her name? Helena or something?
Joyce.
Helena, yeah.
Helena?
It
Helena.
was Helena.
Yeah.
Helena, yeah.
She was a heck of a
Yeah, you
church
definitely
builder.
you definitely see it in the post-Constantine era. I mean, I think part of it too is just that the Christianity was tiny at the very beginning too, so you could cram all the believers in Rome into a bunch of houses, But when it grew, I think that the demand for buildings, came with that. And you even see pre-Constantine, there's archaeological evidence in the 3rd century, 100 years before Constantine, of church buildings being, or old homes being kind of renovated to become kind of a church building. But I think, Sky, I think you're right. I mean, throughout the Bible, you definitely see an emphasis in the Old Testament on centralization of worship and an ethnocentric form of worship. It's Judaism, it's Jewish people. If you want to be part of this, you have to convert to Judaism. Whereas in the New Testament, New Covenant, you see a decentralization of worship and multi-ethnic churches going across around the globe. So, and it's not that some form of centralization is now bad, but you definitely see a much greater emphasis on decentralization of worship throughout the covenant.
And what I think a lot of what we're reacting to, though, is in the last 40 years or so, and okay, tell me if you disagree, as we saw...
I disagree.
Okay, good, good. That's a good place to start. As we saw people just kind of stopping attending church, and more of the culture was quote unquote unchurched Harry and Mary. And we thought, well, we have to attract them back. We have to attract people back to church, which led to the attractional model of, well, what do they like? And what don't they like? Let's do all the things they like, and let's do none of the things they don't like, and make them comfortable. And the quote, I think it was a Hybels quote, we want to create a safe place for a dangerous message. So the message is dangerous, so the place has to be safe, so it needs to be comfy and cushy and doesn't, ask anything of you while you're exploring. And that seemed like a really fundamental change of what church was. To go from, and the believers met together to do these 5 things, to, hey, let's put on a really big production, to bring people in. And what was, because we've for years have done outreach kind of events where you would do a big, that's what the Passion Plays were, big giant events for the whole town, the whole community. But in the megachurch era, that almost became every weekly service was a big, multimedia event for the whole community.
They took the old 19th century tent revivals and made them into established churches.
Yeah.
Every week we're going to do another revival with a big show and a great speaker.
And that was, do you think that was a reaction to, hey, people just don't automatically come to church anymore?
Yeah, I think all those are an attempt to get people into church, because you can't, according to our current model, you can't have a church unless you have X number of people tithing to support the system we've created. So, I mean, and like you said earlier, Sky, I mean, it's a whole vicious cycle that keeps kind of perpetuating itself. When you begin with a model that needs a good amount of dollars that come from donors or supporters or tithers to sustain it, then that's going to focus all your energy on how can we get more and more people at church. And even though I know a lot of pastors, and like all these are really good friends of mine, and I don't want to say the whole thing's bad or whatever. I just think we need to raise some really hard questions. But even pastors I know that say that they're not really into church growth, they're against that. That was the old model. We're not doing that. They still get really excited when people start coming. They get really, really discouraged when people start leaving. The budget now is out of whack, or I might have to lay somebody off. I'm not going to, at the end of the day, it still is fundamentally tied to are we growing or are we shrinking in terms of people showing up to the Sunday service?
Right. Here's Preston being provocative. Why do we do church the way we do? Because it's all we've ever known? Or because people will get mad and leave if we try to introduce more simple and effective ways of helping people become more like Christ? Playing into people's consumeristic felt needs is not the way of Christ. It's cowardice.
Ooh.
Did I
Those
say
fighting
that?
words.
Wow.
Yeah,
Did I
that's
say
in
that?
your
Good.
book, Preston.
Or did your editor put that in?
Oh, blame it on the editor.
Good job, editor.
We're blaming.
Yeah, I think I love it. I love everything you're saying here. I totally resonate with it, and it reminds me that there is a fundamental difference between being a pastor and running a church. There is a difference
Yeah.
between making disciples and growing a ministry. And it's great when all those things overlap, but they don't necessarily overlap, and we need to just be aware of that.
Gosh darn it, this is so convicting.
Okay.
I'm an elder of a church, you know.
I'm on the licensing committee of a denomination.
I'm going to shut it down. Shut it all down.
I'm an ordained minister from
From
our
a
website, I guess.
What did he say?
from a website. What's okay? So you're just an average Joe. You're an average Joe Christian who wants to make a difference. What can you do, Preston? Honestly, give us something that we can do.
Buy my book. I have a section addressed directly to you.
Okay.
Shameless consumeristic plug. He fits right in.
You've never written about consumeristic angles in churches.
I got a lot of pushback actually when I wrote that first book on consumerism, and then I
Really?
tried to tell people about it because they said, "Hey, wait a minute, you're
Yeah.
marketing a
Right.
book about."
You're-
I'm like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? I'm caught in a trap."
Yeah, and that's what the pastor says to you. What am I supposed to do? I'm caught in a trap. They're all Italian. I can't stop a preaching to keep
like,
the people coming in.
It's Father Guido
to
Sarducci.
pay my salary. I'm running out of pasta. Is that what pastors sound like in Italy?
No, I've been to Italy and sat in a church, and that is not what they sound like.
Well, they should. It would be super great. Okay, let me wrap it up. I've been having a good talk with my friend Preston. We've got some assumptions that he's been testing because maybe the church ain't the building. Maybe there's something or two things more important than that thing, because you can pray in a pub. Preston's got a point, listen to him, bub. And he's also kind of unemployed. So if you want an unpaid pastor, he's your boy. And you can pick up his book called Go, not about prostates. It's about discipleship, and that makes it just great in my book. Okay, go check out his book, Go, wherever finer books are sold, mostly the back of Preston's station wagon. And thanks for being on the show, and we will see you next time, Preston.
Bye,
See you guys. It's been
Preston.
fun.
Thanks for being with us.
Bye, everybody.
See you next week. Support us on patreon.com/Phil Vischer.
And good reviews on iTunes.
And good reviews on iTunes. Bye.
Bye.
The Phil Vischer Podcast is produced by Phil Vischer Enterprises and recorded live at Jellyfish Lab Studios. This episode was edited by Jason Rugg and was fact-checked by absolutely no one. For more information, go to philvischer.com.